Well, welcome, friends, to another podcast in our series on the practices. My name is Brandon Hubble, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and mentor, best man, and today birthday boy, John Lewis. Hey, John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You might need to give a little context about what it means to be the best man. I mean, am I the best man in University Place?
the
Come on, you
best
going to tell
man
us?
at the best man at my wedding coming up
That's
in a
right.
few
That's
weeks.
coming up here real soon. We need to let people know that this may be the last time they hear you as a single man.
This is true. This is very true. This is very true. Well, today we also have another guest and friend of Kingdom Story, Judy Olson. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about Judy and then introduce her to our listeners?
Yes. Well, I get a chance. I'll do this in two parts, Brandon. Part one of my introduction is again, welcome, Judy. And Judy and I first met back in the early 1980s. She was the Young Life administrator for Tacoma Young Life, and she held our lives in our office together, and just was a delight to be in relationship with her. And then got to be with her son, lived in the same home up in Bellingham for a year internship I did up there. And so I've been part of that family for this is the four full decades. And she's also just really modeled the conversation we're having today, the practice around coaching, mentoring, giving her life away to others in small settings. It's a privilege to have you, Judy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as John talked about today, we'll be talking about this practice, this idea of coaching. And remember that these practices are in the context of discipleship, what disciples do. And this coaching is an idea that fits into discipleship, and it's much like mentoring, but we've chosen to use this word coaching. And I think with it, it brings, gets rid of some of the baggage, hopefully, that some of us might bring with us when we hear this word mentoring. And so in the context of discipleship, there's an idea of not only being a coach, but also getting coached. And these things go hand in hand, and they should be part of our discipleship journey the entire way through. As we're trying to become more like Jesus, it's absolutely imperative that we have others around us that are helping shape that journey for us, to be models, to be those that speak into our lives, to help us get better at quote unquote playing the game of discipleship and Christianity. Is that
Yeah,
what's
no,
that about?
that's a great start. What we're really talking about is this passion that, and this fundamental up and down of the pistons. I'm be a disciple, make disciples. Be a disciple, make disciples. It's like be a child, grow up, and have children. Some of the language we've used, Brandon, is that what if everyone in the journey of Jesus following had a Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy, or a Paulette, I don't know what the language would be female wise, but you get the idea, is that you had somebody older and wiser, somebody that was helping draw you further, that you had somebody in the journey with, that's on your team, to use that example, and then somebody that you're bringing up, a younger member on the team that you're bringing into the culture, of your team. And so we just think that that's small and yet so powerful and so potent. When we think about our lives and what's made them change, almost always we can point to the Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy's. And so what we're advocating for here, is even to use the image of, for some of us are thinking about pastors. That's their job. Their job is to, in a sense, provide for all of the sheep. And yet, so much of what Jesus did that mattered wasn't him, addressing the whole flock at the same time on a Sunday morning, to use that metaphor, but it's that individual care. It's coming alongside Peter in that individual conversation, or the woman with the hemorrhage, or the rich young ruler. It's somehow these intimate settings coming alongside. And then when you add a sense of consistency of coaching to them over time, the transformation just multiplies.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for us to see that this was a practice that Jesus modeled in his own life. I mean, obviously, he was a coach to the 12 and to the 70, and very specifically the three. But I think there's something we miss in our context today, to realize that Jesus grew up in his Jewish background, where he was very much mentored by his own father, where he was taught by the scribes and the others that were in the synagogue. There was a family of people that were raising him. He did not start his ministry until he was 30 years old. There was a time for him to be taught and to grow in the wisdom and the strength and the spirit, as the scriptures tell us. And so not only did Jesus do that on his part and allow himself to be coached and then to continually hear the voice of
Mm.
his own Father,
Yep.
but then he gave away this coaching to all the others. And John, you have a story to share from the Old Testament that models this pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my favorite mentoring stories, coaching stories in all of the scripture is, and especially in the Old Testament, is Joshua and Moses. You have Moses that very early on, he's not even willing to be the full leader. I don't make me do this, Lord. He's already ready to delegate from the beginning, so to speak. And for whatever reason, he makes this connection with Joshua. He needs his companion that he takes with him to the mountain when God's glory shows up there. He delegates the battles to, the initial battles to the Amalekites. Instead of doing it himself, he's coming alongside, and his protege is sent out, and obviously there's a sense of encouragement and belief in, and hands over, I'm watching you, I've got you covered. There's this taking him into the tent. Here's the secret to my leadership, is my fellowship with God, in the tent of meeting. So you have this incredible commitment over decades, so that when Moses dies, the handing off of leadership to Joshua is fairly seamless. We call it the transition plan, and a succession plan in businesses. That here's the succession plan like nobody's business. And then you have Joshua, who you would think would the very next thing he would have done is he would have picked a young person to come alongside and coach to eventually take his place. But that's not what he does. Of course, he's connected to God. He's faithful. He's obedient. He's courageous. He's bold. They enter into the promised land. Tremendous leadership. But when he gets to the end of his life, Brandon, there's these words that are often inscribed on marriage, paintings. But as for me and my house, the key, we will serve the Lord. It's like, you all are going to fail. You all are going to fall away, but my little house, we're going to be okay. In other words, he was leaving them without leadership. He had not coached people the way he had been coached. And what happened after that? All Joshua's predictions became true. Without strong leadership that had been mentored into place, coached into place, they went into the most chaotic period of the history of Israel, the book of Judges. And so I just highlight that as, again, we can imagine if Jesus had not chosen 12, right? And he had died. And what would have happened to the church today? A very similar model. And so again, the passing on of leadership through intimate relationships of coaching is crucial.
Yeah, we can even see today just a huge kind of lack or a need that is out there for people to step into this role, to give away things that they've had. My generation, those coming after me that are desperate for a type of connection and contact with that learning of something beyond ourselves. I mean, yeah, I have Google at my fingertips. My generation is one that has more knowledge than most others, but I don't know what to do with it because there's nobody walking alongside me. I don't want to learn how to change an alternator by YouTube. I want somebody to teach me.
And I wonder, Brandon, if we can explain some of the chaos of 2020 and 2021 through the lens of, we have a relatively unmentored generation. And so to explore the connections of Moses and Joshua, with a generation that in some ways, the great generation, right, that was very successful, and yet the generation behind them was not mentored well, fathered well, mothered into places of leadership and discipleship. So yeah.
And so we've brought Judy on, and she's had quite an experience, as I've heard, and has had, how she got into this, and even just to be able to answer and to talk into some of these problems that we're talking about today. And so, John, why don't you share a little bit more about her and get her in on the conversation?
Judy. So I'm trying to remember exactly how I invited her initially to be involved in. Maybe it was, I think we had established a number of growing. Okay, I was in college ministry at University of Puget Sound. there was a growing number of people being mentored into leadership roles. It was so far beyond A, because of gender, B, because of just the quantity. And we were committed to those people and their growth, especially those who, were on the point of the spear. And so we began to say, who else in the community, would be a natural person to come alongside and augment our ministry focus with just being a life coach, helping them in their faith and their overall journey and so many issues in their college years. And Judy was one of our stars. And part of the reason I knew Brandon that she could do such a good job was that she had been already meeting with my wife for a decade, or at that time was nearly a decade, back in the 1990s. And she met with Jill Hamilton, a dear friend of mine as well. And they had, I'd seen the fruit of Judy's demeanor, her integrity, her question asking, and what it had done in my wife's life. So I knew that we were tapping into good experience. So Judy, welcome. There's not a lot of people that have kind of decades of experience of being faithful to this call, this quiet call of coming alongside people and loving them, coaching them, guiding them into a deeper walk in life and faithfulness. So thank you for doing that. And would you be willing just to tell us, Judy, just paint for the listeners a bit of a picture of what that has been like for you over the last decades, maybe some of an overview of some of the different kinds of experiences, how many different kinds of women, numbers of women, and maybe the different settings you've been a coach over the last few decades?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is that it's been a pure joy. You become a place where people feel safe talking to you. And so you become a confidant. You have a privilege of speaking into their lives, and they listen. And for many of us, when our children grow up to be adults, we are very careful how much we say. We want them to have the freedom to be living their own lives. And here I've got young women who are asking me, what can I do about this? I'm in a parenting situation. Tell me what did you do? And I think the other thing is that one of the reasons I wanted to go into this was to help younger women avoid some of the pitfalls that I had gone into. Why should they have to learn everything the hard way like I did? Maybe we could avoid some of that. There's the Titus II mandate to older women to help the younger women in their marriage, in their parenting, and to live a pure life. So all of that was a part of kind of the call. John had never asked me, when it came to the college ministry, to do anything but bring cookies. And we'd had a conversation or an evening with him where he'd kind of given us the vision of what he wanted TCM to become. And my heart just kind of leaped. I was so excited. But I determined that I wasn't going to say anything, that if it was what God wanted me to do, that John would call and ask. And so when he did, I just started laughing. And that was the beginning of just a great journey. I led a small group of women for 2 years. There were juniors and seniors. Some of them, that's been like 35, 40 years ago. I'm still in touch with a few of them. Valued friends. Carissa and Jill have become 2 very trusted friends. And we don't just talk about trivial things when we're together, we talk about life things. And so that's been a joy. I've been involved in the women's ministry, mentoring situation at our church, and with MOPS as a mentor. And presently, my husband and I are involved in leading a group at our marriage ministry. And every one of these groups gives me an opportunity to speak into younger women, younger couples. And the thing is about all of them, I think without exception, is when they have said, I want a mentor, when I want to be in a marriage situation, I want to be at MOPS, they are saying, teach me. I'm hungry. Let me hear from you. And that's pretty, that's a really neat place to be, to feel so honored.
Well, I love what you're saying there, Judy, because there is a sense that a number of ministry settings we're trying to help people want to get hungry, right? And the beauty of kind of the coaching relationship is that it really only can work if the person, you know, that's wanting to grow is communicating that to the person who they're meeting with, and that just kind of in some ways gives you an open door, doesn't it? I mean,
Exactly.
it's very rewarding, isn't it?
Yes, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
You're-
So you've focused primarily on young women, which and helping them in particular areas of family and faith and parenting and marriage. How would you say when you meet with people, can you give us a picture of how those conversations naturally happen? Or, you know, how much do you rely on them? You know, do you ask questions? I mean, maybe just give us a picture of kind of a typical time with someone you meet with.
Well, to begin with, every mentoring situation is unique. There's no two that are the same.
Yeah.
And usually we start out by asking, I usually start out by asking, what do you want from this mentoring time? What is it you're looking for? And how do you think we can best accomplish that? And most of the women that I have been involved in are already in at least one Bible study, if not more. And so they don't want another Bible study. They want to talk about the real issues that they're struggling with in their lives. And then how do we apply scriptural truths to those? So it's just a matter of building a friendship, building trust, asking questions that they want me to ask, or having them ask questions, and then we go from there. Like I said, everyone is different. There's never been two the same, and I don't know how many I've met with over the years, but a lot. And some of them have been continuing friendships. Some of them they've gone to different military who've moved away. Some military we've kept in touch with. You know, it's just everything is different with each situation.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, and that's the beauty when you think about the common experience and when Jesus is preaching and teaching, he does parables, there's certain things in common, but then when you get to his individual conversations, they're all different. They're completely based on what the person brings to him at the moment. And so I think that part of what I'm, reading into what you're saying, Judy, is that for those of us who like spontaneity, who like to follow the flow and the needs, that the coaching relationship is ideally suited, because we come to serve rather than to initiate a program, to initiate an agenda. We assume God's already working in their lives, and it's our job to kind of uncover that and discover that and help that fan the flames of that. Does that make sense? Is that your part of your experience? Yeah,
absolutely. And another thing that being in that kind of a relationship brings is accountability. It's just kind of built in, because you ask questions and there you've already established the relationship where there's real honesty and vulnerability. So accountability is a part of that.
Say a little
too.
more about accountability, Judy, because I think that word can be misunderstood at times, and from its full meaning or its full blessing in someone's life. What does accountability look like? Yeah, between you and somebody you're meeting with.
I think for me, it's just been asking pertinent questions, hard questions. Sometimes when I see a red flag of any kind, or even if I don't, being willing to say, hey, how are you doing in your thought life? Are you in the scriptures? What's happening in your family? What's happening in your friendships? Are you carrying a grudge? What do we need to address? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So here, Judy, I would love to, because of all your experience, you've been a church person, you've been in groups before, and you've also spent a lot of time individually with people. Why is it that people are more willing to hear those kind of questions you just mentioned in a context with one other person than they would be willing to address them in a group setting? Does that make, yeah. What's the magic of the one-on-one relationship that allows you to go those places?
I think it's just trust, friendship and trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, yeah. And that what friendship provides is that I'm known, that I'm not just a cog in the wheel, that you care. And maybe they know, and this is so great about you too, Judy, is this, it's not just the questions you ask, it's the way you ask them and when you ask them, that they know it's part of your love for them. Say something too, Judy, about, you mentioned on the front side that part of what coaching others has allowed you to do is to pass on not only your quote successes, but also passing on, here's what I wish I had done differently, right? In other words, and so I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what role your own storytelling, your sharing your own vulnerabilities and struggles and even dare say failures at times. How has that been an important ingredient along the way with these relationships?
Well, that's definitely a learning curve for me. My generation doesn't share failures and vulnerabilities very easily, but being in relationship with younger women who share very, very freely has freed me up. So that has not been something that has ever come easily. It's mostly been, just, learn from, I wish I had done this instead of that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, you're touching there, Judy, on, in some ways, we benefit ourselves when we come alongside someone else to help them grow, right? So we become people that are stretched and challenged by this relationship. Say maybe when you think about over the years and all these settings with all these folks, can you say something just about how this practice has shaped you? How has it benefited you and who you've become over the years? So one would be is the willingness to be more vulnerable. Maybe what else would you add to that?
Well, I think where I was going to head with that was just my time with Jill and Carissa. It has developed from what started out in the beginning to be a mentoring situation to now it's more of a trust situation and a two-way street where I feel like I learn maybe more than what I teach. Jill and Carissa have developed into beautiful women of God who walk their talk and who are involved in their ministries that are amazing. And I get to be the benefit of hearing what they're doing. And often there'll be something that they will say that will challenge me. But we have been friends and been meeting and we don't meet that often, especially
right.
Now this last year, we've only met a few times, but we always just take up where we left off. And so there's no gap. But I think that almost maybe without exception, every single mentoring situation has been a two-way street where I've always learned so much. It's made me more comfortable with my children and grandchildren, being with other women in their generation. I understand more. Yeah.
I love that. I think you're tapping into something really significant. We could almost take an entire session on this, but that the seasons that you've passed through with Jill and Carissa, when you meet for 25 years, you're not doing things the same way or in the same context, and you've grown and developed. I think about parenting. You start off changing diapers and teaching them the basics, and then 20 years later, you're saying, well, you're my friends. In other words, we have an adult relationship, and yet my kids still can look to me for some kind of coaching and mentoring. And so there's a very real sense for those who are listening that the practice of being coached is more intensive, maybe at the beginning, to meet more often, to get more direct input, accountability, all of that stuff. But then as you grow, you may start by having 3 or 4 different people giving input in your life. But over time, and you gain momentum, there's going to be a slow shift to meeting less often, perhaps to having a fewer mentors. But now you're spending more of your coaching time coaching others, right? And so there's this sense that as you develop over a long period with Christ, that this whole practice of coaching grows and morphs and changes, and what you get out of it is same but also different in the different seasons. So
yes.
Let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about if we, as a group here, Brandon, you've been quietly listening, and I know you've got things to say here. Let's talk as a group now, as a trio, around the reality of why is it then that if coaching has so many benefits, if Jesus so well modeled it, if we look in our own lives and are so grateful for those people, then why are so few people committed to having coaches, having people walk alongside one-on-one in their life, or to be that for others in the next generation? I would just love to know from your all's experience, what are the barriers that kind of get in the way? Let's talk about it for a minute.
I'll start.
Yeah. Brandon.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen and out there is that there are some that are really trying to make a concerted effort at coaching, and they're doing a horrible job at it. But the main reason is because they've never been coached before. That as a reality, and how beneficial this is on both sides. Somewhere along the line, it got pushed to the responsibility of a teacher in a classroom, or a coach literally on the field, or your boss at your work. But the parents passing some of these on in generations today, and even a lot of men that I'm working with down at the rescue mission and other places, have never been coached before. The destruction that is behind them in their lives is because they have no clue how to live a different way.
Right.
And so they've just never been I mean, and that's an extreme example, but just in the day to day, I think there's a lot of people who just simply haven't been coached in how to do life, but then how to do life for Jesus, and what that is really like.
Well, that's, and you're bringing that up, Brandon. I like that coaching image, is that, and you and I talked about this a few days ago, is the difference between like a line coach on a football team and a head coach. And whatever the image is that a parent has the role of caring for somebody holistically. And so you may have had somebody at school that cared about, your English performance as an English teacher, or your basketball performance as a basketball coach. But we need somebody in our life, to coach us like holistically, that cares how the different parts relate. I'm not hearing that in your Judy. I'm hearing that you care about these women in multiple facets of their life, and you see those different parts integrated. And so I would just say, Brandon, amen. Not only do we need to be coached, but we need to be coached by somebody like a parent, even in our spiritual life, who sees the big picture and who is going to walk us through a holistic foundation, if that makes sense. So love that. And if we don't have that, how can we pass that on to others? And
it can be as simple as, like, when Jill and I first started meeting, I had teenagers and she was a newlywed. So we were just walking through different stages of life. And that was the case all the time she was raising her children.
Yeah.
Another completely different scenario is in our re-engage group. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about conflict and how many of their parents had resolved conflict in their marriage. Not one.
Wow.
They had no good model of how to resolve conflict. So there's so many ways that we can pass on what we've learned, whether it's through being in church and being taught that way, or being modeled.
Yes.
We don't have the scenario anymore of community where we're learning from people older than us. And so we have to get that going again.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're pointing out that the only way to grow in discipleship is not to be coached, right? I mean, there are ways we pick it up in relationships when it's modeled to us. Coaching adds a unique ability, though, to help us in an area where we haven't had a chance to witness it as much, right? Where we can hear through the stories of where it's harder. This is not something that's easy just to watch and learn, that I may need some extra help. And so the coaching relationship is something that takes the obstacles away from transformation through the extra attention of conversation, of processing, accountability, etc. I'd love to know, Judy, too, in your church context, where you have so many women in the church, how many of them are actually coaching other young women in the church? And what have you seen has been kind of an obstacle for more of the, other older women in the church to give away who they are to other young women? Why aren't there more Judys in your church? What would you say?
Well, the positive part of that is that because it's been going on for so many years, and there's a lot of teaching and equipping that going on, we probably have about 40
Wow.
groups of, twosomes. But there's also just a reluctance of, I don't know enough. I don't want that responsibility, kind of what Brandon was saying. It's just scary. I don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to be that responsible. And it's hard to overcome, but the fact that we have had pretty good success, and then through the group settings with MOPS and Reengage, there's a number more. So probably.
So I'm guessing that, so part of it is anytime you start something, there's the unknown. So all of a sudden I come to your church and I see there's 40 women doing this and having a success. Immediately, some of my inhibitions are addressed, right? So that's part of, I love that idea of you've got history and a culture that's making it easier. How would you speak to someone who come and said, I don't feel like I'm adequate to do this? What would you say? What would be one or two things you would say to them to dispel that misunderstanding?
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, you have something to share with somebody else that doesn't know as much as you do. If you've lived life, you've got some either successes or failures to share that will help someone else along the way. There's no one that doesn't have something to give.
And so there's that sense that a mentor is not somebody who has it all together. A mentor is somebody on the journey.
Exactly.
And ironically, Judy, I have found, and Ben, and I'd be interested to know what you think. When you work with people who are struggling, which is, by the way, most of us, when we actually lead with our vulnerability, we actually build more trust. The irony is that nobody is wanting perfect people to be their mentors. They actually want to know that we're struggling like they are. Does that resonate with anyone?
That's true.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're talking about with coaching is a commitment to come alongside somebody and help them go, in a positive direction. It doesn't mean that we're an expert. It doesn't mean that even that we have to have a lot of knowledge in any particular area, but we have to be willing to give away who we are to another to help them in their journey to go farther up and deeper into, use C.S. Lewis's language, to become more like Jesus.
Another thing that we found to be a great part of our success is that we have a starting time and an ending time of commitment, so that we're not asking you to commit to being a mentor to this person for the rest of your life. Would you do it for a year?
Yes. No, I like that. And Judy, let's lead that into some starting places, right, Brandon? Of, how do we get from, okay, I'd like to jump in, and how would I get started? And so, boom, right away. One thing is, if you can find a group of people that are already doing this, like at your church, Judy, that's really helpful to have some structure. It can be, it's one way. The other way is to set a limit of some boundaries so that nobody feels like they're trapped for life. What other things would we want to say would be important in getting started on this journey of being a coach?
I think something I'd want to say is, we're talking about something very, particular here, and even using some analogies, but the reality of the way God has set up coaching and the relationships of people. I think one of the things I would begin to start encouraging anyone who wants to start doing this is really just begin to open your eyes and look around. I guarantee you somebody is in front of you or has presented themselves, or God is presenting them to you as someone that you can lean into and begin to start giving your life away to whatever degree. And it won't be as hard to find as some might think, or as hard to engage in. And you may have found that you're engaging in it already. You just didn't know that that's what you were doing. And so for someone who's either afraid of this, or leaning in. Well, for the person that's afraid, I would even say to you, you're already coaching somebody by your absence. And so,
Oh, wow.
and so even to recognize some of that, and lean in. So just as a first step, to begin opening your eyes and look around. What are you seeing that's in your immediate vicinity?
So Brandon and Judy, building on that flow of thinking, and I'm thinking about how Jesus didn't wait for people, very often to say, "Can I follow you?" He said, "You come follow me." What do you see as the next step? How do we initiate with somebody that we think would potentially, be a good fit for us to come alongside? What's our role? Do we wait for other people to initiate with us? Is that realistic today? If not, what do we need to keep in mind as we think about how to initiate with somebody and start a relationship like that?
If it hadn't been for Jill coming to me and asking me, I probably wouldn't have started. I'm sure I wouldn't have started. I had no idea what was involved, no idea where to go with it. It was completely new territory.
Right.
So if there's someone that, I'm talking from the mentee's perspective, someone that you respect, someone that you've been watching their life, ask. And then find someone to help equip that person.
Yep.
For me, that's taken me a little bit. I know your question, and I will get there, John, but even for me, the first two that came into mind approached me, as after teaching them in a class for quite a while. I had two that approached me, but beyond this, there's been more that I've engaged in, and it begins with seeing, but then as you start asking those questions and leaning in to really beginning to understand what people are wanting, and looking for, and then presenting the question, um, do are you wanting someone to follow? In other words, as Jesus said, "Come and follow me." In this, it's a little different. We don't necessarily come and follow me, but it's more of an asking, like, are you looking for someone to follow? I would present my life to you,
Yeah.
to do that. And so that has been a way that I've done it, especially down with the guys at the mission, and some others at church, as I've gotten beyond the hurdle of those that came forward and said, "Hey, I want to be mentored," kind of Judy's experience. And that's what taught me and got me in. But now the seeking, and asking for those that are ready, those that are showing interest, those that have responded to certain things already. Believe Jesus did know these guys. It wasn't a cold call, to some degree.
Right.
But
Well, that's important, is you're spending down time at the mission, facilitating experiences of scripture, but also telling your story, and they're telling their story. And in that environment, there's an opportunity, just like, dating or something, for like a combustion, for a
Right.
connection. And so, Jesus knew enough about Peter that he could say, "I'm going to make you a fishers of men." In other words, I know that that's kind of how you're wired. So you're not saying, "Let me be just, a parent in your life," but it seems like you want to grow here. Let's do that together, right? So getting to know people enough to find that connecting point and to be able to speak with confidence that you know them, and that you could maybe offer them the journey of friendship and coaching.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Anything about go ahead.
I think also that you guys, John and Brandon, as you see people that you feel would be good mentors that you would do, or good coaches, you would do the same as you did for me, that you would go to them and say, "Hey, we see something in you. Would you be willing to share your life?"
No, that's good. And you think about whether it's business leaders or church leaders, Judy, organization leaders, that's part of our mantle, isn't it? That if we're a coach committed to reproducing ourselves and empowering others, that helping others become mentors is a key strategy. Can be entering. It's like a head coach that realizes they need a whole coaching team, and so you're absolutely right. It's a good word, is how to starting with ourselves.
And you would need to provide some equipping.
Yep. So for those of you who are thinking about wanting to be a coach, again, at one level, it's not as complicated as you think it is, but it's not something that you just merely look on your phone, how to be a mentor, and Google it. It's meant to be done in the context of community. Get some help, come alongside somebody who's done that. What did you learn? be mentored in how to be a coach. Take the time, because this is a lifelong transformational skill and journey that is worth the time and the effort, by all means, in our lives. So
Yeah, it's one of the beauty gifts that the more you coach, the more you'll need to be coached.
no, I love, and when you coach, you realize you have to know and live what you're coaching as, but also I'm also forced when I do that to admit where I fall short. And so it breeds in me a kind of a constant sense of humility and eagerness to grow. So we could spend some time, if we had more time, how have the three of us been blessed and changed over the years in our faith journey with Christ through being coaches. So yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to bring Judy back for another follow-up episode as we
Yep.
dive deeper into those things. But Judy, it's been a pleasure talking with you today, to hearing your journey, just all your insight and wisdom for this. John or Judy, are there any last comments or thoughts on this subject?
Thank you.
No?
No. I hope people feel like that this isn't something for the elite, that this is something for the masses. This is something that Christ intended, for all of us in our journey to find our place in coming alongside and helping make disciples. This is the command and the call. It has to be accessible. And Lord's blessings on all those listening who find themselves taking a commitment a step deeper in that direction.
Yeah, I really say it, and I say this to many of the men down at the mission who believe that they have nothing to give because of the life that they've lived, and they look to me as a mentor and a coach, and I look right back at them and say, you have things in that mind, heart, and soul that I need. Please share them with me and share them with the world. And so I encourage all those that are listening that there is someone who needs to hear what you have. Please do not hold it back. Begin coaching today. Find someone to share your story with and to engage in it. And to remember that John and I are just two disciples
trying to find our way into God's story.
Amen. Amen. Thank you again,
Amen.
Judy. And we'll talk to all of you later.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon, for hosting.